Fight fans, welcome to the PBC Podcast, brought to you by Premier Boxing Champions with your host, Kenneth Buhari and Michael Rosenthal.
Welcome, everyone, to the PBC Podcast. I'm Kenneth Buhari, and he is USA Today Boxing Junkie editor Michael Rosenthal. We want to thank you guys for joining us following this 3-day weekend. We've got a full show, as always. Mario Barrios will be joining us. And, of course, our toe-to-toe segment a little later on. But first, let's get into some hot takes, Mike. There was some boxing last week. Did anything stand out to you, though?
We've been talking about this quite a bit off the podcast. Jose Pedraza fought Mikkel Lapierre on Thursday. Pedraza, by the way, looked terrific, won the fight. But what stood out was something that just absolutely left me flabbergasted. I'll see if I could if I'm able to describe this in a condensed manner. Pedraza went down in round 5 from a punch to the stomach. And when it happened, the referee, Kenny Bayless, scored it a knockdown. Okay, so the round ends, they go to their corners, they take the minute to rest and all, everything that they do. They get back in the middle of the ring for the start of round 6, and as soon as the bell rings, Bayless calls a timeout, climbs out of the ring, goes over to his colleagues at the Nevada State Athletic Commission and tries to determine, based on the video replay, whether or not Pedraza had actually been knocked down or whether he had tripped. Turns out he had been tripped. His foot got tangled with the foot of Lapierre. I have a comment on that too, but I'll save that to the end. So anyway, 2 minutes and 10 seconds pass. I mean, I'm just watching this, just thinking, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. The broadcasters at first, like, okay, and then even they were just like, what? In so many words, in a more sophisticated way, they were saying, what the hell is going on here? This is nuts. They'd never seen it before. Apparently, you can do that. From everything I'm hearing, that you can do that in Nevada. You could actually stop the action. So they restart. So they rule it a trip, so it's not a knockdown, and they restart the fight. Well, it's been 2.5 minutes. The Lapierre, I actually need to throw in one more thing. Pedraza put Lapierre down later in the round, okay? Right. And I think he's sufficiently recovered, but he might have still been a little bit groggy, a little bit hurt. So the fact he's got 3 minutes to rest, including the minute between rounds, the guy's completely recovered, right? Second, the fighters are extra 2 minutes. They're getting cold. I mean, it's not a good thing. It's hard to start the engine, stop it for a minute. I think even that would be a little bit hard, but they're used to that. But stop it for 3 minutes and then restart it, I think that's difficult for the fighters. And I thought it sucked the life out of the fight. It was a pretty good fight, or real good performance by Pedraza, and it just kind of sucked the life out of it. They kind of just finished the fight as far as I was concerned after that. Anyway, so beyond that, the timeout wasn't necessary. In my opinion, Bayless could have just told Lapierre and his cornerman after round 5 that the knockdown might have been a trip and was under review. Then a replay official could have made the determination during round 6 and informed the corner before the start of round 7. In other words, was it really imperative for Lapierre to know whether it was a knockdown or a trip at that moment? I know it changed the scoring of the round. Still, I didn't think it warranted stopping the fight for 2 minutes. It was just crazy. And on top of everything else, and then I'm finished, Bayless and company got the call wrong. In my opinion, it was a knockdown. Yes, Pedraza tripped over Lapierre's foot, but it was a clean punch that started the process. In my book, that's a knockdown. I guess that can be debated. That's not completely crazy, but the first part of it was completely nuts. So I hope it was just some sort of strange aberration and that it won't happen again. My goodness, it was very, very strange.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that if a punch lands, regardless of what's going on, if you trip or not, if a punch lands and you go down, that should be counted as a knockdown. Doesn't necessarily mean you were hurt, but it was a knockdown. A punch did land, which aided you to the floor, usually. Now, as far as what happened, you know what? I like the idea of instant replay in boxing. I think it's a great idea. Whether we'd get it right is something different altogether. I mean, what should be done is they should review, questionable knockdowns in between rounds, or immediately right after it happens, a separate person, not the referee, but someone else, reviews the knockdown and so forth, and decides whether or not it in fact is a knockdown. That would work. But I feel like if we did do that, somehow we would mess it up. Boxing would find some way to make it not work. Do you remember open scoring? I don't know if they still do it or not, but I definitely remember it for Canelo Alvarez versus Austin Trout. And I think they announced it after every 4 rounds or so. And the cards did not reflect what was going on in the ring. I think they had Canelo up by like 7-1 or 8-0 at one point, and it was a close fight at that point. I'm thinking, what is going on? And that must have killed Austin Trout's spirit. Not to mention, it probably changed the way that he fought, because if you realize you're down, you're down 4-0, you're down at 7-0, it's gonna force you to fight, which of course played into Canelo's hands. So I don't know, but do you recall that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think they still have it outside the country. I think in Mexico and maybe I think in some other places too. I think it's nuts. I think it's nuts on we've deviated to a different topic, but it's a way that boxing screws things up. I think the problems are the way you just described them. I think it also takes away, like, one of the best things in boxing. One of the unique things to boxing is waiting for that decision at the end of the fight, not knowing what happened. Yeah. That's one of the best things in boxing, and the open scoring takes that away. I understand the logic behind it. You're supposed to keep the judges honest, that kind of thing, but it's a terrible idea. But back for a second to the instant replay. What's even stranger to me, and if they changed the rule, if they changed the way they did it, it had to be fairly recently, because when it first came about a number of years ago, the way it was laid out to me is that under no circumstances would the fight be stopped. That if you're going to use the replay, it had to happen between rounds or after the fight, I guess.
Well, that would be the right thing to do.
Well, and that's the way it was laid out to me, and that's the only thing that makes sense. If you can use, and they do use the instant replay. I've seen it during the series. Or they use the replay, and they at least once they changed the wrong call, and so it was a really positive thing. You can do it, but you don't stop. You just don't stop the action. That's where they just went wonky.
Yeah, you just can't do that. Which, you know what, makes me think about low blows and those kind of files. Now, there's a 5-minute break for that. What are your thoughts on the 5-minute break? Is that too long? Is that just right? I know it's obviously a different situation.
You're going to lead me into something else too. You know what? I haven't thought too much about that. I mean, you almost think that if a guy really gets nailed, you should give him as much time as he needs.
Right.
5 minutes seems right to me. I hadn't really thought about that. I guess it depends on how egregious it is, but how do you really know that?
Right. I haven't taken one to the gonads in a while, so I don't know if 5 minutes is a good amount of time or not.
At least they get time to recover. You get leading me into all these crazy things that happen in the ring. Another thing that just absolutely drives me mad, and I'm just ad-libbing here, it just drives me, when I see it, I just go absolutely nuts, is when they spit out their mouthpiece to gain an edge, to gain some sort of advantage. Like if a guy's hurt, he'll spit out his mouthpiece and they'll stop the action. And every time they do that, I'll jump up and down figuratively, in anger.
What did you think when Diego Corrales did it against Jose Luis Castillo?
Yeah, that you know what? That's one of the ones that I think of. I think they should. Now listen, some doctor might say that I'm being cruel or crazy to say that they should just continue to fight without it until there's a natural break in the action. But that's how I feel. If you spit it out, sorry, dude. I mean, if there's a way if the referee can see for sure that it came out accidentally, maybe that's something that's different. But guys do it all the time. When they're hurt or they're tired, they'll just spit it out because they know they'll get a break in the action. When a guy's hurt and then he takes these sneaky ways out, and which I would probably do if I were in their position, it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah, and I think with that you take it on a case-by-case basis. I understand why some folks might be upset at Diego Corrales for spitting out his mouthpiece against Jose Luis Castillo, but man, what an ending that was. Perhaps we don't get that.
It's one of the greatest. Yeah, it's one of the greatest fights ever, but you can argue that he cheated.
Right, exactly. And he did have a point deducted, but he also was able to buy time. I mean, he had been dropped. We should ask Joe that.
I was going to say, we should ask Joe next time that he's on the thing what he thinks about that. I'm sure he'll defend him. Yeah, you know what's funny? In that case, in one case, it's okay if a guy cheated because we got one of the best fights of all time.
Right, one of the greatest endings. So we'll see what happens, and hopefully that what occurred last weekend is further examined by the state commissions and we get some clarity there. Now, another bit of news that's been making the rounds involves undefeated lightweight Ryan Garcia, your buddy. Garcia was originally slated to face Jorge Linares, which is a fight we've discussed so many times, and I don't know if it's ever going to happen.
Yeah, we might see it.
Who knows? We'll see if Garcia gets past his next fight, and that's the issue right now. The WBC ordered that he face Luke Campbell in an interim title fight. I believe that was last week. But now here comes the WBO ordering Garcia to face Ghana's Emmanuel Tagoe in a title eliminator for their belt. So it's really all so confusing. The Athletic's Lance Pugmire reported today that Garcia is negotiating with Campbell for a fight, so perhaps they go in that direction. But Mike, your guess is as good as mine.
Well, it sounded like, according to Lance's tweet, that they actually agreed to fight, and now they're negotiating the terms. But who knows? You don't know until the guys step into the ring.
Right?
That's the thing. When we originally prepared our notes for this podcast, I was going to talk about sort of the benefits of fighting Campbell versus the benefits of fighting Tagoe. And what I wrote is that I hope he fights Campbell. I think that's a better fight for Garcia, and I think it's just a better fight, probably. Although I don't really know much about Tagoe. I think Campbell's an Olympic gold medalist. He's got more name recognition than Tagoe. He's got more experience at the elite level. He's fought twice for major titles. He lost both times. Close fight against Linares. Speaking of Linares, but he lost pretty one-sidedly against Lomachenko. But anyway, good fighter, real good fighter, long jab. I think he could give Garcia some problems. If Garcia beats this guy, especially if he knocks him out, Campbell's never been knocked out. If he could beat this guy or knock him out, it's really a big feather in his cap. I'm not sure you could say quite the same thing with Tagoe.
Well, I could definitely see him struggling a bit with Campbell, but I could also see the knockout happening. I could even see an early knockout. Don't forget Linares put Campbell down fairly early. We saw what Lomachenko did. I mean, look,
came back strong though.
He did. I mean, I think that, but Linares, whatever. But the reality is that Campbell's definitely a bigger name than Tagoe. He's fought better opposition as a pro, certainly far more accomplished, and also far more accomplished as an amateur. So on paper, Campbell is the tougher fight, and that's to take nothing away from Tagoe. Is he as good as Linares or Campbell? Like I said, on paper, certainly not, but he's still a significant step up from Garcia's prior opponents. He's the nephew of former 2-division world champion Nana Yao Kanedo, for the old timers that remember him. He's also promoted by Asamoah Gyan, who's one of the best soccer players to emerge from Africa over the past 10, 20, 30 years or so. I believe in the 2010 World Cup, he scored 4 goals. He was the man in that tournament. And Tagoe does have some solid names on his resume. He's got a shutout win over Paulus Moses, who gave Ray Beltran, I believe, hell in the fight prior to facing Tagoe, and Tagoe did a number on him. I mean, completely outboxed him, shut him out 12-0. It was pretty one-sided. Now that said, it looked to me like Moses had seen better days. He just didn't show up that night, but maybe Tagoe deserves some credit for that. He also has a win over Muncie Fana, but I believe Fana was over 40 years old and had seen way, way better names. Tagoe's fought primarily in Ghana, only once in the U.S., I believe. However, he did move to Florida last August, and during his stay in Florida, he was trained by Javier Centeno, who's one of the better younger trainers coming up in the game. He also works with George Kambosos Jr., who I'm sure you know, the undefeated lightweight, and the 17-year-old phenom Xander Zayas, I believe his name is. Anyway, Tagoe was supposed to fight in March here in the U.S. That didn't happen because of COVID, so he's back in Ghana. So part of me wants to see him get the shot, but for the greater good of boxing, I think Campbell's the bigger name. I probably draw more interest in Tagoe, but honestly, I'm fine with either one, Mike.
Yeah, I would be fine with either one, but I'm more excited about Campbell. I have a lot of respect for Campbell. I think that Garcia needs a test. This is a test. I'm almost a little bit surprised given the circumstances because of the money that supposedly is available, during the coronavirus thing. I almost expected him to go with Tego, so I'm pleasantly surprised that they went with Campbell. Again, I think that's a better fight for everybody involved except Tego.
Well, Ryan Garcia ducks nobody. It's what I'm trying to tell you.
This fight is an indication of that, I guess.
Right, right. So let's see what happens, and if it does happen, man, I can't wait to see how he performs. Now, all these lightweight names we're mentioning, there's one person in the division that I haven't heard much about, and that is Devin Haney. Is he being frozen out of the lightweight picture? I mean, no one is calling this guy out.
Well, this fight is good. If this fight happens, that's good news for Haney, because the Garcia Campbell fight is supposed to be for the interim title, with the winner to face Devin Haney for whatever the hell title
Right.
he has. Lomachenko is the lightweight division in terms of the titles and the belts is just a mess. Lomachenko is the franchise champion. Below him is Devin Haney. Fortuna and Linares are fighting for the diamond belt, and these guys are fighting for the interim belt. So we're talking 4 different belts. And this is WBC. This is supposed to be the WBA's domain. This is the WBC, 4 different belts. So, I mean, I think I laid it out correctly. But listen, we know that Lomachenko is the king of the heap.
Right.
Yeah, he's supposed to fight Teofimo Lopez. I don't even know if that's for a title unification or not. I mean, is a franchise champion, is that a title unification?
I don't even know how that works. I mean, I'm done as far as trying to figure out the rules and regulations of these belts, but it should be a unification. I mean,
I agree. Yeah.
He was WBC. He was elevated to franchise champion. I am under the impression that means that he doesn't necessarily have to defend against mandatories, but I don't know what the rule is for unification. Now, Teofimo Lopez holds the IBF title, so I don't care what the rules say. To me, it's a unification bout, and whoever wins is the man in the division. I do hope Devin Haney gets a shot sooner rather than later. It looks like the way things are being set up, he will get a shot, but I guess it means he's probably going to take another tune-up in the meantime. So we'll see about that. Now, another fighter also in search of an opponent is Canelo Alvarez. We say that all the time. We probably say that.
It's annoying as hell.
Yeah, it's getting ridiculous. Now, Alvarez appears to be solely campaigning at 168 pounds now, and he is likely to return in September. One opponent that's been mentioned for him is Sergey Derevyanchenko, but Derevyanchenko is mulling an offer to fight undefeated WBC world middleweight champion Jermall Charlo. Mike, if you're Derevyanchenko, what do you do?
I don't know. You know what? This is a tough call. You don't get too many chances to fight the number 1, 2, or 3 boxer, in the world. And maybe from a fan perspective, he's number 1, maybe him or one of the heavyweights. That kind of opportunity doesn't come along very, very often. If he fights Canelo and beats Canelo, his career just goes absolutely through the roof, right? But if he fights Charlo, I think it's a more winnable fight against Charlo. Now, that's no disrespect whatsoever to Charlo, who I really like a lot, and I think he's a tremendous fighter. It's just, Canelo's one of the top 2 or 3 pound for pound guys in the world right now. So I think it is a more winnable fight. It's a more natural weight for Derevyanchenko. I think that works, in Charlo's favor if he really wants to fight Derevyanchenko. I think that I lean toward Charlo, but you beat him, and then that puts you in a good position in terms of bargaining power. You never get a fight with Canelo after that, but I think you're still in a pretty good position. So if I had to advise him at this very second, I'd say go for Charlo. But if he chose Canelo, I would completely understand it.
Yeah, me too. Obviously you don't get those opportunities that easily in the sport of boxing. However, he's got to take whatever he thinks is the best deal, and that's just not financial. Although who knows? I mean, the assumption is somehow is that Canelo would offer more money based on what we've been seeing the past few weeks. I'm not sure that's necessarily the case anymore. In which case, he would be fighting one of the sport's biggest moneymakers at a discount and at a weight where he's not necessarily comfortable. Now, I don't think that Canelo is that so far ahead of Derevyanchenko or Charlo that that makes Charlo a more winnable fight for Derevyanchenko. I get what you're saying, but I think the real issue here is that he wouldn't be fighting Canelo at 168 pounds.
Yeah, that's part of it.
Which is what you alluded to.
Yeah,
That's the real issue, is that he's more natural. He's not a big puncher, and that would be even diminished more fighting at 168. So, I can totally understand why he would go with the Charlo. There's a title belt at stake, a big American name. It should be a great fight. Either way, the fans do not lose. And I, for one, would be extremely excited to see Charlo. And I guess his biggest fight since Julian Williams, when he knocked out Julian Williams a few years ago. I mean,
exactly.
It would be a fantastic middleweight fight. Now, there's also the rumor that Canelo may face former world title challenger David Lemieux. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so I've always thought that Alvarez would fight Lemieux at some point because they've both been with Golden Boy for so long now.
Right.
I thought they were sort of grooming Lemieux to be Alvarez's opponent. I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet. That's actually a decent backup. We haven't talked about Anthony Durrell, but I guess it's still a possibility. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a decent backup. I think Lemieux is a decent backup for Alvarez. I don't think it'd be much of a fight, to be honest, even if Lemieux were at his best. I'll say this, though. It'd be really fun to watch while it lasts. Lemieux is just an absolute bomber. He's one of my favorite fighters to watch. It's been a while. I don't even know when the last time he fought. I have to go check. I think he's one of the most entertaining fighters in the world. I don't think he can beat Alvarez, but he's going to go down swinging, which is always fun to watch. I would just hope. I want to clarify this though. I would just hope that it doesn't look too much like Lemieux's fight against Gennady Golovkin. I thought he took too much punishment in that fight. I kind of felt sorry for him at the end.
I think it would look even worse. You mentioned he's an all-out bomber, and my mind just flashed to when Canelo Alvarez fought James Kirkland.
I was going to say that. But he's better than Kirkland though.
I don't think he's that much better, particularly this version that Canelo would be facing. Perhaps in his prime, I'd agree with you. I don't think Lemieux's anywhere near that at this point. And I tell you what, I hate to use this word, but I think Lemieux, even at his best, was a bit overrated. I mean, the guy lost to Marco Antonio Rubio. He lost to Joaquim Alcine. I just never saw. Yeah, he had a couple good
wins.
Curtis
Stevens, right?
Curtis Stevens, who's another person I have questions about, but I just never saw it with Lemieux.
He's never a great fighter. Yeah, when he stepped up to face Golovkin, it was obvious.
Right. I mean, he's been soundly beaten pretty much, and same thing when he fought Billy Joe Saunders. He looked like he didn't even belong in the ring. Right. And in Canelo, he's taking on the best opponent of his career. So I do think it's a mismatch, but it could be an entertaining one, for as long as it lasts, as you said. All right, let's move on to the next part of the show. Our interview for today is with the undefeated WBA World Super Lightweight Champion, known as El Azteca, Mario Barrios. Mario, first things first, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. Just dealing with the whole quarantine. Still trying to get all my workouts in and everything. And then just patiently waiting on a fight date.
We've seen you pretty active on social media during this time, and active in your community as well. We'll get to that in a second. But you've been pretty vocal regarding George Floyd and the protests around the world. What motivated you to do that?
We've been having the Black Lives Matter protests, the Vanessa Guillen protest here, but I felt, I had to be vocal, especially when it came to, to the whole Black Lives Matter protest. There's no doubt about it, color has never been an issue, in my life. I started here in San Antonio at the Eastside Boys and Girls Club, which is a predominantly black side of town. And, that's where I learned how to box. And even now, even being in the Bay, Virgil is my coach, my command, Don, who was raised in East Oakland his whole life. It was something, that I felt, that was very important, for me, to stand for, and to stand alongside, my other, black and brown brothers and sisters. And, so it was an awesome feeling, being out there, And of course, it's a constant fight. It's something that's not going away. Something that had to remain standing against.
Oh well, I think a lot of people are certainly glad that you stood up and voiced your opinion. But that's not the only place where you've been active. My understanding is that you've been involved in the COVID-19 recovery efforts in San Antonio. as well. Can you give us some detail as far as what you've been doing?
Yeah, so we had teamed up with a local company here in San Antonio, Davies Entertainment, run by Cameron Davies. So we were taking breakfast, it just depended on, what restaurant was catering, or that we were getting from that day. And we were taking a meal and some coffee from the local Black Rifle Coffee Company to some of the first responders. We had delivered one package to, one of the police headquarters here, another one, to a fire department. And then one of the last ones we had visited was one of the hospitals downtown that were getting a lot of the COVID patients. And so that was also an awesome feeling, especially at the time when the outbreak was first starting, just giving back to those who were still risking everything, every day.
Mario, it's kind of hard to keep track of what's going on in the different cities across the country. How bad is the situation there in San Antonio from your perspective?
It's pretty bad. I mean, for sure, I think to begin with, when they had opened the bars, in May, I don't think that they should have done that, because I know right now in San Antonio, we're getting hit pretty bad, with the second wave with COVID. I believe yesterday, the day before, they just announced 14,000 people were now had now tested positive in total. So I mean, it's getting up there, yeah. So I mean, it's something, like me, especially since I'm trying to get a fight, I'm having to really stay away, so I don't contract it, because I'm trying to get back in the ring as soon as possible. And with all these cases rising, something I really had to be aware of.
So, but you have been trying to help anywhere you can. What's inspired you to do that?
I mean, like I said, when all this had first started, I was in the middle of camp out there in the Bay Area already. I was out there in February, and the middle of my camp, of course, everything happened. I had to come back home, and I kind of felt like I wasn't able, to do anything. Of course, I couldn't train at first, so I was just literally just here, in the house, for like a week or two. And, of course, seeing everything going on, that's why I felt the need, to give back. So when Cameron Davies had brought up the opportunity, if I wanted to help out, go and deliver, some meals to the first responders, it wasn't even a question, it was something, I was looking around to get involved with in the first place.
Awesome. Speaking of San Antonio, your friend and fellow San Antonian Joshua Franco just pulled off a big upset. He took Andrew Maloney's title. That reportedly makes 5 world title holders in your town. What's your reaction to Joshua's upset, and what the hell is going on in San Antonio?
Yeah, I'd always said, San Antonio it's a hotbed for boxing. It was just a matter of time, before our city, started to get the publicity it deserved. And, so seeing, my good friend, Josh, fight for the title the other night, on ESPN, it was amazing. Me and Josh have known each other since the time we were kids, for a couple of years. We were training, side by side at one of the local boxing gyms. And, of course, we keep in touch all the time. So seeing, him, get through a very difficult fight and, and start to, and just the way he dominated at the very end, it was awesome to see. It's an even better feeling, knowing now there's 2, world titles in San Antonio. And again, like I said, San Antonio's a hotbed for boxing. There will be more, in the next year or two.
Mario, you mentioned training and the difficulties associated with that with this current pandemic. How have you been able to work out at all? Have you been?
Yeah. I have been, fortunately. Again, thanks to Cameron Davies, he had opened this a public and a private boxing gym. It was a very beautiful facility. But thanks to him, I was able to get back in the gym. Late April. The only downfall, we had to get regularly COVID testing, so I was getting that nasal swab every week, every 2 weeks, just so I can continue training. But again, I'm always staying active, so whatever it takes, to be in the gym.
Now, Has there been any word on when you might return to the ring?
Yeah, I spoke, to Al and my managers, Luis Cucuz and Bob Santos. Right now, we're shooting for, mid-August, so hopefully, once the PBC, once PBC returns, I'll be on one of the first cards, because, I'm going on almost a year of being inactive, so I've been itching, to get back in the ring for a while now.
Any idea on who the opponent might be?
Not too sure. We know this one, the next one, it's going to be a title defense. It's not going to be the rematch, but hopefully, after the title defense, everything goes good. Again, I'm not overlooking, my next fight, but maybe after that, we'll get the rematch with Akhmedov.
So last time you fought was in, you just sort of alluded to this. The last time you fought was in September when you won a tough, close decision over Akhmedov. What'd you learn from that fight?
I learned a lot. It wasn't my first 12-rounder. It was my second. But again, just being in there, with the type of fighter Akhmedov is, very relentless. That constant pressure, and at the same time, he has, that weird European style. That's the first time I had fought someone from overseas. So it gave me a look, I hadn't really seen before. At that too, he was southpaw. He was very experienced. He had represented Turkey in the Olympics. So, I was able to take a lot, from that fight. And as soon as right after that fight, I was speaking with Virgil, and we're going over, the mistakes I had made, what I could have done better. But at the same time, Virgil told me, to enjoy the win, because I deserved it. It was a very tough fight by far. The hardest fight of my career. And I tip my hat to Akhmedov, for giving me that type of fight. Both of us were warriors that night.
You mentioned this also. August would be 11 months since you were out of the ring. Do you think you'll be able to pick up where you left off, or are there any concerns about having ring rust? How do you approach that?
Yeah, I don't believe there's going to be much ring rust. After our fight in September, I took a month off, just to rest my body. It was a long camp, a very tough fight. And but right after that month, I was back in the gym. I started sparring around January, just because I missed, the feeling of moving around and everything. So since January, I've been sparring here and there. Again, I was in camp, in February, so we were getting ready to fight in May, but that was before, the whole outbreak. And so again, I haven't fought in over a year, but I've been very active, in the boxing gym, been sparring, for months now, and I'm just excited, to get the opportunity, to be stepping back in the ring.
You're still a young fighter, obviously. What are you working on in the gym? What areas do you think you need work on to prepare to, to face the next level guy?
One thing that, I'm always getting drilled on, whether I'm here with my dad training in San Antonio or whether I'm in the Bay Area, they both, my dad and Virgil, they both always having me drill the hell out of my jab, always. So that's something, I do get away from, in fights, and I start wanting, to trade punches too much. But, that is one thing, that has been, a huge focus, since, even just, when I started working the Virgil, just, fighting off my jab, using it in different ways, applying pressure with it, getting out of danger with it, just, there's so many ways you can use a jab.
You mentioned the rematch with Akhmedov. Is that something you're actively pursuing, something that you want?
Yeah, of course. Me being the person I am, our fight, it was very close. I myself, I only, gave the decision to myself because of the last round. And, at that too, I had the last round, a 9-8 round. But, I was fortunate enough, I was, had a great camp leading up to that fight, which was the reason why I was able, to stay in that fight, even in times where, it looked bad on me. And, so, a second fight, like I said before, I believe, Akhmedov, he fought his ass off just like I did. I believe, he deserves a rematch. And, I'm more than willing to give him a rematch.
Well, Are you comfortable still making 140 pounds?
Yeah, right now, that's my focus. Staying in the junior welterweight division. After this fight, we'll see what happens with the next. I would like to contend, for one of the other titles against one of the other champions. We're gonna stay here at 140 pounds, until it becomes too much of my body. Then, we'll look, on taking the next step in my career.
So you are planning at some point though to move up to welterweight? Yeah, you've got the frame for it.
Yeah, exactly. So again, I just turned 25 in May. We know, I'm still, not very young in the sport no more, but I'm still, at a good age, where I can make the weight. But there's no doubt about it, and it's just a matter of time before we make the move up to 147.
I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here, but there are a lot of big names at super lightweight. Do you think about, beyond Akhmedov, the rematch with Akhmedov, do you think about guys you'd like to fight?
Yeah, of course. Like I said, I mean, if it was up to me, I'd be fighting for one of the other titles. My next fight, I believe a fight with any of the current champions, with one of the other current champions, it would be huge. A fight with Ramirez, or a fight with Taylor. I would love, to contend against any of the other title holders right now.
So we understand that you started boxing at 6 years old. Do you ever look back and reflect on how far you've come?
Yeah, it still feels surreal to me. I was just the other day, like last week, I was in the gym. Then there was some of the younger kids. One of the kids in there, he's around 16, 17 years old. And he trained with his father, so I was looking at this kid and his dad, his dad was lacing him up on the ring. And I was telling him, I was like, man, dude, I was like, it feels like, we're just, in his, footsteps, before, we decided to turn pro. So, I mean, it was very surreal, it feels like it was just, a blink of an eye, then a couple years later, here I am, and, thankful, very, humbled to be one of, San Antonio's world champions. And just one of the world champions in the sport of boxing.
And you're still really only getting started, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what me and Verve talk about all the time. There's still so much left to do in my career. The road is it's barely being paved. There's still so much that I can accomplish in the sport.
Fantastic, Mario. We really look forward to following you going forward and having you back on the show. Thanks a lot for giving us your time.
Oh, of course. Thank you guys as well.
All right, it's time for Toe to Toe, the segment each week where Mike and I go back and forth over a topic or two. And this week, we're going to discuss the mythical pound for pound list. We've all got them, but some lists are deemed more important than others, and those are the ones published by boxing outlets and so forth. Those are highly regarded, but ultimately these lists aren't based on really any statistic. They're subject to human error and bias and so forth. So let's start with this, Mike. My first question to you is, how much stock should we put into pound for pound lists?
Forgive the cliche. It's sort of just, they are what they are. There is no stock in a pound for pound list. It's just kind of like for fun, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it helps in marketing, that kind of thing, but it's just all about fun. I've heard people poo-poo pound for pound lists. I personally like them a lot because obviously I like to debate boxing related topics, and there's nothing more fun to debate than who's the best fighters, right? To me, it's just about fun. And I think it does give fans an idea who the best fighters in the sport are. I think that it also does that, but the key here is that it's got to be a responsible party putting together the list. Otherwise, they get really crazy. Like, for example, thank goodness that BoxRec.com exists. Otherwise, we'd all be lost, right? But their pound for pound list is just goofy.
Isn't it based on some algorithm?
It's based on some sort of point system, which obviously just doesn't work. If you look at the list,
seriously,
you'll see what I'm talking about. They would probably agree that it's a little bit odd. But anyway, if you're talking about The Ring, you're talking about the transnational rankings, ESPN, a couple more. These guys are serious boxing guys who try to get it right, that kind of thing. So, I mean, I enjoy them. And the beauty of it is there's no right and wrong. everybody's got an opinion and nobody's necessarily wrong.
And I think you nailed it. They're fun, most importantly, and they do sort of give you a baseline as far as who are the boxers that are a cut above the rest. I mean, it's great to compare the list and so forth, but I do have some problems with how they are done. And I guess one thing that we should discuss before we get into that is the criteria. What factors do you believe should be used to determine who is a pound for pounder?
Okay, so I've evolved a little bit on this, but that's a lot of discussions and a lot of thinking. So I'm pretty comfortable where I am right now. It's a combination, and we're a little bit different on this, as you know.
Right.
It's a combination of resume, which is huge. Obviously, resume is incredibly important, but it's also a big part of it's also the eye test, watching a guy fight, seeing what a guy can do. It's a combination of both, and I can't really tell you like a percentage of which, that kind of thing. But it's a combination of both, and both are important.
I agree with you. I mean, for me, the eyeball test does take a back seat to the resume, but I believe the eyeball test is important. Hey, look, I remember Floyd being ranked pound for pound number 2 after he beat Genaro Hernandez. Now, that was a great win. Should that catapult him to number 2 pound for pound? I don't know, but I think not just the win, but how he did it and all the skills he showed in that.
Yeah, that's important.
Mm-hmm. It proved that, man, this guy's already on his way to being one of the best, being the best fighter in the world. So I'm not discounting the eye test. I may believe a fighter is better than another, but until that fighter actually goes out and proves it, I can't say that I can't place him over someone who may have a better resume. I feel that you do have to prove it.
Well, would you really not rank somebody if they have just a slightly better resume? If you really like what you see more than the other fighter?
I think when it's that close, then I could see why you'd go with your eyeballs. I'll get into it in a bit why I feel that you run into some issues there, though, because honestly, your eyes can deceive you. I mean, and it's basically you saying I believe this fighter is better than the next person, even though he hasn't necessarily proven it. And I'm all for belief. In places of worship mainly, but I do believe in the sport that we need something, a bit more tangible, something that takes place in the ring. But I get what you're saying, Mike.
Yeah, it's a strange balance, and I don't know what the percentages are, but I just have my own feel for it, and I have my own list. Boxing Junkie, we have a pound for pound list. I'm pretty comfortable with it, but it's all just up for debate. It's all just opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And look, here's some of my issues with the pound for pound list. Now, most outlets that publish them are beholden to promoters. I mean, there may be a panel or something like that, an independent panel that tries to do their best they can. I certainly wouldn't doubt it, and I love the Transnational Rankings Board. But while part of me believes that there's a part of me, and I know we discussed this off the record, a part of me believes that there may be some bias against fighters advised by Al Heyman. I'm going to give these guys the benefit of the doubt and say that's not the reason that they're overlooking quite a few fighters who I think unfairly have been left off the pound for pound list in recent years, while others are giving a lot more credit that they may not necessarily deserve. And I'll give you an example. Mikey Garcia. In my opinion, he's a top 10 pound for pounder. Yet he's not on the ring pound for pound list, although Artur Beterbiev is, Gennady Golovkin is. And those are two guys I think are excellent fighters. But they're also two guys who have accomplished significantly less than Mikey Garcia. So I guess my question is, how is that the case?
Okay, I can approach this from a couple different directions. I'm just giving you my speculation, my take. I think maybe in the case of Beterbiev, I think sometimes people get excited when a guy does something spectacular like Beterbiev did. Was it Vosdik that he knocked out?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I think people get excited. They get too excited sometimes. It's like when Pacquiao was coming out. Now Pacquiao probably deserved it, but people got so excited. He's better than Henry Armstrong. This and people just go completely crazy. That's my guess with Beterbiev. I don't know for sure. As far as Mikey goes, I agree with you. I have it on the website. He's number 10 on our pound for pound list.
On Boxing Junkie, you mean?
I'm Boxing Junkie. But this is the thing about Garcia. Why I think you can argue that maybe he doesn't belong in the top 10. I think Mikey took a pound for pound hit when he was dominated by Errol Spence. People see a guy lose that badly and they think that guy isn't a pound for pounder. You can't lose that badly and be a pound for pound guy. And I sort of get that. At the same time, that's not what pound for pound is. It's how good you are regardless of weight. This is an important designation. Pound for pound is who's the best, who's better, regardless of weight. Weight shouldn't factor in. So he was too small for Spence. If Garcia, in my opinion, if Garcia were fighting lightweights or junior welterweights, where he probably belongs, I think he'd still be kicking guys' asses, and I think he'd get more and more pound for pound respect. I think, in my mind, there's really no question that Mikey's for sure like a top 15 pound for pounder. And like I said, we have him at number 10, and you could argue that he should even be a little higher than that.
Yeah, you certainly could. And I'd be inclined to agree with you, except I'm going to point out another welterweight. Look, Danny Garcia went through the gauntlet at 140 pounds. He embarked on a run there, the likes of which we have not seen since at that weight, and he couldn't sniff a pound for pound list. I mean, he had huge upset wins over Amir Khan and Lucas Matisse, knocked out Amir Khan in 3 rounds, 4 rounds? Heck, it took 6 rounds for Terence Crawford to do it last year. And at the same time, around that same time, Vasily Lomachenko, who I take nothing away from, is a Hall of Famer, in my opinion, certainly one of the 3 best fighters in the sport today. He was on the pound for pound list when his record was 6-1. I mean, he had only one notable win on his ledger, Gary Russell, who was unproven at the time, and he also had a significant loss on his record. He didn't have anybody else that battered. Yet guys like Leo Santa Cruz, I've never seen a pound for pound list. I don't know what Lomachenko had done that was better than beating both Carl Frampton and Abner Maris. Jermall Charlo. So the pattern to me is disturbing, and it does make me wonder what is the criteria being used, and are certain guys just being ignored?
I'm just going with my gut here. I don't think anybody's being ignored. Again, I like, for example, at the ring, I know these guys. They're pros. I think let's put it this way. At least they try to be objective. I think they could, if you sat down and talked with them or got them on the phone, they would explain to you why they're positioning guy where they're positioning guy. Like Danny Garcia, for example. I think you can't look too far back in a guy's resume and use that as a reason to rank him as a pound for pound guy. Like, I love Danny, and I call him the winner. He's kind of guy who just finds ways to win fights. Love the guy. But he's lost his last 2 fights against big name guys.
I was referring to when he was at 140.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Okay, so you don't mean now then?
No, I'm talking about then he wasn't even on the list, but Lomachenko was on the list at 6-1 with one decent, but not even a great win at the time.
If I recall, when I was at the ring, he did. I don't know if he got onto the pound for pound
for about a month.
Certainly was close. I think the thing with Lomachenko kind of goes back to what we were saying before. It's people get excited about a guy. They see this special talent. They look at his pedigree, 2-time Olympic champion. Maybe you're right. Maybe you get too excited about a guy. But I think these people really believe that pound for pound, he was where they positioned him. I think they really believe they might have been right. But I see your argument too. If your only victory is over Gary Russell,
who was largely unproven at the time,
right? Then I see the problem. I was at the ring for quite a long time. One of the problems we had was not to getting overly enthusiastic. You got to be careful, because if you put a guy up too high too fast, then you're kind of screwed. And it happened because you get excited. It's a difficult thing to do. That's why toward the end of my tenure there, I really tried to be conservative and tried to ease guys in to the top 10 based on what they did in the ring. I didn't want to get too excited, because then you get into trouble like we're talking about right now. It's a hard balance. It's a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, and I just thought I never understood what it was about Danny Garcia. I mean, his knockout of Amir Khan was something to get excited about. Let me just give you these list of names he beat in order, in succession.
Yeah, I've read the list myself.
Yeah, Nate, I think you read it on this podcast.
Yeah, I did a couple of times.
Just remind the readers, this guy beat Nate Campbell, Kendall Holt, Eric Morales, Amir Khan, Eric Morales, Zab Judah, Lucas Matisse, Mauricio Herrera, which was controversial, Rod Salka, which he'll never live down for some weird reason, Lamont Peterson, Paulie Malignaggi, and Robert Guerrero in that order. It's insane. And they're fighters today on the pound for pound list who haven't accomplished anywhere near.
Well, nobody fights guys like that. Well, maybe Canelo does.
Right.
Yeah, the guys don't do that. I mean, I think Abner had a long run against really top guys, but very few fighters do that anymore.
Never sniffed the pound for pound list either. But so it's weird. I don't know what the issues are with some of these publications, but I say it's time we do our own PBC pound for pound list, something Mike and I have been working on. We're just going to go with 5 choices because we may catch some flack for these, but this is what we're gonna do. Five Premier Boxing Champion, fighters. Our top 5 pound for pound. Mike, I will let you start first. We'll go in ascending order. Who is your number 5?
Let me say 2 things real quick. First of all, this was really hard. This is really hard because my second 5, my 6 through 10, at least 2 or 3 of those guys I want to put in the top 5.
Sure.
So this is really fun. And it shows you how deep the talent is. It's very deep talent-wise. And at the end, it might actually be good for us. I don't know if you have a second 5, but it might be nice to mention them. Yeah. Anyway, number 5, drum roll, the aforementioned Gary Russell Jr. I hesitated to include him in the top 5 because his resume should be better than it is. But here's an example where the talent's just through the roof. He's got those quick hands and he's got that boxing acumen. It took a savant like Lomachenko to beat him, and he caught him obviously while he was still developing as a pro. I'm not sure I'd pick anyone at or near his weight to beat him, which I think says a lot. I think he's that good. He just needs more big names on his resume. That said, he does have a few good wins, so this isn't just based all on the eye test or anything like that. I just think he needs like 1 or 2 sort of breakout defining victories in his career.
All right. Well, before I get into my number 5, I'm going to mention some guys that didn't make the cut. Actually, you know what? Maybe I should save that, Mike.
Yeah, we'll both do that.
Not ruin the surprise. So I'm going to go with my number 5, and it is the undefeated WBC World Middleweight Champion Jermall Charlo, 2-division world champion. He holds wins over Julian Williams, Matt Korobov, Austin Trout, Dennis Hogan, Cornelius Bunridge back in the day. I'd like to see him step up at 160, and I think an impressive win over the aforementioned Sergey Deverenchenko, if that fight comes off, could do wonders for every facet of his career. Now, who do you have for number 4?
Number 4, I have Sean Porter. To me, it's obvious that he should be in the top 5. He did what he did against Spence. Everybody just loves Errol Spence Jr. for good reason, obviously. He's in the top 5 pound for pound on pretty much everybody's list, right, or close to that. He's one of the best fighters on the planet, and Porter came within a whisker of beating him in a Fight of the Year candidate. Porter is a physical, swarming guy like a Henry Armstrong or an Aaron Pryor, who also knows how to box. He's been doing this since he was a little kid. He's another guy who takes his opponents to hell, even if he loses, but you're always going to get a great fight from him, and he's also going to be incredibly hard to beat, and obviously doesn't lose very often.
Yeah, and you can make a case, not just the Spence fight, which a lot of people thought he won the Spence fight, a lot of people thought he won the Thurman fight. Imagine if he got those decisions.
Yeah, he'd be undefeated. It'd be great. Where
his ranking would be.
He shows you how good he is. That's my point.
Exactly. He's an excellent fighter. Now, my number 4 is the aforementioned Mikey Garcia, 4-division world titleist. He's got the wins over Orlando Salido, Sergey Lipinets, an underrated win, I think, Adrian Broner, Robert Easter Jr., Jesse Vargas. Heck, this guy probably should be higher than what he is on this list. Obviously, the shutout loss to Errol Spence Jr. drops him a tad, but not too much. I don't think there's that much shame in a former featherweight losing to a monster like Spence. All right, let's move on to our number 3. Who do you got?
Number 3, I have Mr. Leo Santa Cruz. I think Santa Cruz is the most understated, if that's the right word, of all these guys that we're going to be talking about. But he's a guy that just gets the job done. Talking about a guy who knows how to win fights. He comes in just super fit, throws a million punches, which doesn't give his opponents much room to work. Super durable guy, which also makes his opponents' lives miserable. And I think he's a better boxer than he's given credit for. I think he's a real smart boxer. He's got really sharp boxing acumen. You put that all together, you get a special fighter. You know, it's interesting. I'll just throw in one little extra comment here. Is during this list, I'm not listing the guys that they beat. So it sort of shows you that you emphasize the resume a little bit more. I kind of wish I had, to be honest. But I'm giving you why I think the guy's so great more than listing the guys that he's beaten.
Yeah, and I for this list, actually, I weighted eyeball test quite a bit. But yes, I think resume counts. In the case of someone like Leo Santa Cruz, he's got the resume, and plus, and plus he looks the part. I think he's even better than some think like you. I think he's an underrated boxer. He's got a very high ring IQ. He's just all around a very, very good fighter. Now, my number 3 is two-time and current WBC World Super Welterweight Champion Jermell Charlo. I think he's one of the most underrated fighters in the sport today, but I believe we'll see him on all pound-for-pound lists within the next year or so. Honestly, he should be there already as far as I'm concerned. He was a big underdog when he easily outpointed Gabriel Rosado back in 2014. He had wins over a still formidable Vanes Martirosyan back in the day, Joaquim Alcine, not to mention, obviously, Erickson Lubin, Austin Trout, and, of course, the big TKO of Tony Harrison in their rematch last December. A lot of people, including us, thought he won the first fight as well. Now, he's been talking about a unification versus the WBA IBF 154-pound champion, Jason Rosario. That's a potential fight of the year, and in my opinion, whoever wins should be top 5 pound for pound, maybe even top 3. I don't
know. Yeah, I've gotten more and more respect for him. Yeah, and that fight is just that's one of the most special matchups in the works right now. I can't wait to see that. Jermell's really done some special things. I agree.
Yeah, I can't wait. All right, Mike, floor is yours. Who is number 2?
My number 2 is, and it shows you how much respect I have for Mikey Garcia. It's Mikey Garcia. He's also a complete fighter. He might not be as athletic as some guys, but he's a superb technician who can also crack, just absolutely crack. We saw that against Jesse Vargas in his last fight at welterweight. I think that's a really unusual combination. Again, if he were fighting guys his natural size, I think he'd be eating them alive.
Yeah, I agree with you. And he's on my list, maybe a little lower. But my number 2 is none other than Manny Pacquiao. Look, he's still going strong at 41, as he showed last July versus Keith Thurman. A very impressive, decisive, clear win that proved that he's still elite, to go along with his phenomenal accomplishments in the past. So a no-brainer there. And now it is time for your number 1. Mike, who is it?
You don't want me to talk about Pacquiao?
I don't know if I want to hear this, but go ahead. I notice he's not on your list, so I already know where this is going.
You know what? I love Pacquiao. What he gave us, in his prime is just incredible. What he gave us against Thurman is incredible. I didn't consider him for this. I think he's too old, but I get it. He's still an incredibly good fighter, and I don't have a big problem with that.
Yeah, I think he's elite until proven not so with that win for Thurman.
Right.
But I understand what you're saying and why you might be hesitant, particularly who knows what he's going to look like in his next fight. But he's a marvel.
He's a legend. He's absolutely, and I wouldn't be surprised no matter what he does, to be honest with you. And I love the guy. Number 1, I think this is like going to be anticlimactic for both of us. My number 1 is Errol Spence Jr. I think he's the most complete fighter under the PBC banner. He could do it all. He could box. He's quick. He can move. He can punch. He can take a punch. He can adjust. Just everything. He does everything. I have one criticism of his, and I know this might sound random. I think I've said it before. Is he intentionally fights his opponent's fight as if to prove a point. For example, he boxed with Mikey Garcia and he brawled with Sean Porter. That's not a good idea. That's going to come back to bite him. I hope he gets over that. But easy number 1 for me. It's like, to me, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, definitely number one, and good point you make. I know you've mentioned it before, and hopefully he's got so many tools in his toolbox that at some point he realizes. And I've heard him say that if he fought Sean Porter again, that he would definitely box a lot more than he did the first time. He's also my number one as well. I mean, unified, undefeated world welterweight champion. He's the number one guy in the most competitive division in the sport. We saw what he did to Mikey Garcia. He outboxed him, shut him out. He outfought Sean Porter. Big win over Kell Brook on the road in enemy territory. And, of course, Lamont Peterson, Chris Algieri. The resume matches the skills, and to me, he's the top dog, possibly in the entire sport. That remains to be seen. Still a lot more boxing for him, hopefully, and a lot more boxing, period. So that concludes this week's toe-to-toe segment. But actually, before we close out, Mike,
do we want to
I want to hear who you got for 6 through 10.
Okay, so
you got to put it in order. I'm not sure I will, but
I'll say it in order. I have Jermall and Jermell at 6 and 7, and I really agonized over that because I have a tremendous amount of respect for both of these guys as fighters. They could easily be in the top 3. That's how much respect I have for these guys. It's just so many good fighters. Luis Neri, number 8. I think he's a little beast. Even today, I have Danny Garcia at number 9. And I do respect Mr. Manny Pacquiao because he's number 10.
Oh, okay. So he did make the cut. I was wondering. Yeah, now, for me, my number 6 is Leo Santa Cruz, who is on your list. He just barely misses mine. Another person, number 7 on my list that made yours, Gary Russell Jr. And then number 8, I've got Gervonta Tank Davis, who I think his resume is a little slept on. We saw one guy that he completely obliterated a couple years ago. We saw what he did last week and looked pretty good. So I've got him at number 8. At number 9, I've got Danny Garcia, still a great fighter, perhaps not as good at 147 as he was at 140, but he's hung tough with the top guys at 47, and we'll see what he can do against Errol Spence. And then I sort of cheated on number 10. I've got 10A and 10B, and that's Caleb Plant and David Benavidez. Two of the best at 168, and I just can't choose between one. So hopefully I don't have to in the future. They make that fight, and we can figure out who's the better of the two. As always, we look forward to your feedback regarding our toe-to-toe segment, particularly this one with the pound-for-pound list. I'm sure we're going to get a whole bunch of different responses and so forth, and we welcome them all. All right, let's take a quick snippet break, and we'll be right back. That's going to do it for today's show. We want to thank Mario Barrios for taking the time to join us, and we want to thank you, of course, for listening to us. The PBC podcast is available on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, Spotify, everywhere. Basically, you'll be able to find our podcast. So be sure to check us out next week for more boxing talk right here on the PBC podcast.